Just want to get on, do a little talk show for everybody. How's everybody doing? Just want to be the third place for everybody to just hang out online. All my legions of followers. I have 100 subscribers. It's been a big week. There's been some breakthroughs recently. I've leveled up. I'm not sure what level I'm on now, but it's one level up than the one I was on before. I think. But I have 100 subscribers now. So I've been playing around with the layout of my Scenes from a Life YouTube page. Supposedly I can change the URL, which is going to be a huge thing. My URL I made when I was trying to be a singer-songwriter. I wasted so much time playing music. I really never should have done music on stage at all. I should have just done comedy. Or spoken word, let's call it. But anyway, I named my YouTube channel www.youtube.com/user/songsofshoyish. So nobody can find Scenes from a Life when they search for it on YouTube. But now I have 100 subscribers, so I'll be able to change the URL. Except, I don't know, for some reason YouTube has having some kind of maintenance thing, so I can't change it. I'm just going to talk about everything tonight. I don't know that there is. I had a few shows this week. First and foremost, I want to talk about 83 Weeks, Eric Bischoff's podcast, which has actually lasted way longer than 83 weeks. I think this is just how podcasting works. It's just like, it's just every single person gets to tell their story. Every person gets to tell their point of view. And so anything that's like a niche, like wrestling, it's like every single wrestler has got a fucking podcast where they just talk about the 90s and shit. They talk about the glory days. I mean, that's the thing about WWE's content libraries. They can just live on that stuff forever. The WWE network is just all the pay-per-views and Monday Night Raw and all that shit, Nitro. You can call up any of that shit if you're a subscriber. So it never has to end, you know. You can just keep watching the NWO even as these dudes die and shit. I mean, Scott Hall passed away this year. Rest in peace. Razor Ramon. The NWO was a way for middle-aged fucking hillbillies... meathead. Yeah, well, I don't know. Nothing against, like, they're my dudes, whatever. But what they're really doing is they're upcycling and they're sort of processing gang culture for little middle school fucking white kids out in the suburbs and shit. I was listening to Eric Bischoff podcast, and they're talking about how Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were real good buddies with Conan. And Conan would kind of teach them about gang shit or whatever. Like the way that Scott Hall would wear that fucking like handkerchief on his head. Or just all their like fucking signs and shit. All their hand signals and shit. I even think NWO, basically what they did, they ripped off NWA. Essentially. Like their whole look, their whole attitude and shit. Except they're middle-aged jet ski riding fucking dudes who live in Thunder Bay and shit. You know, not that it wasn't effective. It's just kind of funny that Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, I don't know, when I'm listening to this podcast, like, okay, when it was happening, I hated those guys. I was not a fan of the NWO. I got to it kind of late. I started watching wrestling in 97. By that point, the NWO's glory days were kind of not, it wasn't as hot. It was still a hot storyline, but WWF was on the come up. And I think with wrestling, it's like, it's one of these things that it's like, it's cyclical. They get you when you're a little kid. It's weird. It's such a weird form of entertainment, but for me it kind of phases out of my life. Like I watched it when I was a small child because I do think it has to do with certain anatomical fantasies and, I don't know, projections and little man, strong man, or just like giants. But it's theater. It really is this kind of operatic, highly physical. And I think it's natural to want to watch people fight. It's just like, that's what nature is, right? It's just fucking, pissing contests, essentially. It's just very natural. And so, I don't know, it's a way to make something like a ballet out of that. A masculine ballet, I suppose. To me, it really is about the maneuvers, nothing. I don't think anything taught me as much about the body, actually, as wrestling. I don't know if I've ever. It gives you a whole technique and lexicon. I mean, it's a martial art, I suppose. It's a combat sport. But, like, it gives you a whole language for how your head can fit in here, and that's a fucking DDT, and this is this can go here, and this and this and this and that, So, like, if I got into a fight with somebody, I'd know how to put somebody in an armbar or something. I could fucking put you in a headlock or a back body drop or a Russian leg sweep or a I don't know. Some of the sharpshooter is no fun to be in. But anyway, so I really was not a fan of WCW that much as a middle schooler, which was when that was the last time I really watched a lot of wrestling, was kind of the WWF Attitude Era. And to be honest, ECW was my favorite shit. I should talk about ECW too, but I got back into it because it was WWF and I was sort of familiar, like I knew, of course, fucking Hulk Hogan. That was a big part of my childhood, Hulk Hogan. I'm sure most fucking poor hillbilly kids can probably relate who grew up in the 80s. I mean, Hulk Hogan was a big fucking deal if you grew up in the 80s. And so, coming into puberty, he was having his heel turn. It really was a brilliant fucking move. Like, I gotta hand it to him. And so, as I get older, I won't say that I like Nitro or WCW better or anything, because I'm to be honest, I'm not watching the actual product, so I couldn't really say. I think there's things to be said for both WCW and WWF. I hate the name WWE. Let me just say that. I mean, it works, but to me, it will always be the World Wrestling Federation. There's nothing better than hearing Vince McMahon. Well, I mean, when it comes to wrestling, roid out and scream, the World Wrestling Federation. It just intensifies it in a way that, like, I think World Wrestling Entertainment was a way to soften the edge and kind of, it was part of their whole public push to be like the corporate wrestling, and they succeeded, I mean, Vince is the best. Like, he won. He won the fucking Monday Night Wars. He's the smartest. He's the alpha. He's the arch predator. He just retired. That was the thing, right? This summer. They never thought it would happen. Vince McMahon retiring. Even though he's fucking 80 years old. And he doesn't, I mean, even for 80, he doesn't look good. He looks weirdly kind of deflated, like he looks like he's in the Muppet Band or something. I don't know. I guess it's easy. These wrestling guys are just such fucking characters that, like, the lore, the backstage part of it has, at least since the 90s, this was another aspect of when the Attitude Era came in. It's like that was sort of the beginning of the internet, or at least like, near the beginning of the internet. And I would go on WrestleZone.com every fucking day to read the news about. Because to be honest, like the most exciting things that happen would be like, oh my God, this guy jumped from WC, like when Jericho went from WCW to WWF, or Benoit or whatever. It was like, holy shit, they changed, or Bret Hart goes to WCW. It's like that. Those were big. Those were about the most dramatic things that could happen because especially at the time, because the consequences of the Monday Night War felt so real. It felt like Vince McMahon is fighting for his fucking life. This was my perception of it at the time, right? Maybe this is spin or whatever, but like Vince McMahon is a self-made business owner, whatever. He inherited the company from his father. They're independents, even though he ate up all the territories and killed them off. He's not a corporation like Ted Turner. He doesn't have all this other shit, CNN and this and that, to sort of back up. Ted Turner was just playing in the wrestling game. He didn't have this personal stake in it like Vince McMahon had. Plus, WCW at the time was literally just like WWF in the 80s. It was the same fucking dudes. It was Hulk Hogan. It was Brutus Beefcake. It was a lot of the same fucking people. I mean, Flair or Hall and Nash, right, were in WWF. Bret Hart had been in WWF. It was just like a lot of their fucking roster. It was like, these are just people that they fucking stole. They didn't develop this talent. That was the perception of it anyways. Like, they're a big corporation. They just paying these guys money. The product seemed like, it seemed corporate, to be honest. And listening to this Bischoff podcast, like, you can kind of see why. That's who he is. He's like an executive. I don't know. That's how he thinks. I can see his logic with a lot of stuff. And, like, you can see why he made the decisions he made. And I don't think they were all bad. Like, I mean, to be honest, like, they took that company, which, like they were saying, their number one show was WCW Saturday Night in the early 90s. And they'd be playing, 800-seat house shows or whatever. And then when the NWO happened and Nitro and all that, it's like, now all of a sudden they're playing domes every fucking show. There's 35,000 people there. Like, it's the number one rated show on TV. Like, I think at the time, WWF kind of wisely repositioned. I mean, there was no old stars. Hardly at all. It was all new people. It was all characters that they were building, and they were smart about their brand, right? They did kind of rip off the ECW thing, and I'll get into that, but like, they positioned themselves as like edgy, young, anti-establishment, raw, right? The big explosions. It was kind of dangerous. They would do shit. They were very much a part of the whole 90s thing with like pushing the boundaries, Bad Boys, shock, like the Howard Stern thing. It's very, that's why he has Hogan on his show and stuff. It's like arena rock. It's like Van Halen. It's cock rock. It's this big, dumb, masculine kind of in-your-face thing. And WWF especially. I mean, I think Vince was having his midlife crisis and was like, totally roided out, but he would just, and he's just, what can you say? He's just a spirited guy and a bon vivant, and like, he wanted to do all that shit. He wanted to have people kiss his ass on TV, and he wanted to like go through fucking tables and like do cage matches, and he wanted to be the heavyweight champion. He wanted to be on fucking Muscle and Fitness magazine and all that shit. And he did it. He wrote himself into the storylines, and he became, like, one of the best fucking characters, Mr. McMahon. That was the whole crux of the storyline, right? Was Stone Cold Steve Austin is kind of the blue-collar badass. Vince McMahon is the fucking corporate CEO. So to be honest, I don't know. I kind of thought WCW was kind of lame. It was kind of just like, it was clumsy. It just like the booking. It was kind of way more about size. You know, all the dudes in WCW were like fucking just big jock assholes. Fucking Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and they just would dominate the show. The NWO would come out and they just kept adding people. It's just like, what the fuck? Like, Virgil's in the NWO. Sting is in the NWO. Fucking, was Disco Inferno ever in the NWO? It's just like everybody was in the fucking NWO. They just kept adding people. It's like it doesn't mean anything when everybody's in the... And there was no rivalry. This is one of the things that kind of pissed me off about this podcast is like, even now Bischoff doesn't see it. It's like, if they're going to have and they're going to load that many fucking people in the NWO, they could have had an opposition in DDP, Goldberg, and the Four Horsemen, and all the WCW people. They could have had like a war. It just never really developed. It was like all the WCW people were kind of here and there. It was never like a group. It could have been like the fucking Justice League or something, right? It could have been the Avengers versus the NWO, but it ended up just being Hulk Hogan going out. When they jobbed out Goldberg, that was the biggest fucking waste to me, because it was like they had built this goddamn streak up forever. And it was, to be honest, like, it's interesting to hear Bischoff talk about Goldberg, because I do think he's right about certain things. Like, he keeps saying Goldberg was very green, but it's also like, you also got to allow him some time to develop. You can't just say, oh, he's green. You can't have him do interviews. You can't expect him to do too much. It's like, he was getting experience. Like, that's how these guys develop. You got to push them. You got to let them do stuff. I do think that they kind of buried him a little. They did that with everybody. And the way that they jobbed him out, they built his streak up forever. It was like, and he was, I mean, I wasn't the biggest fucking Goldberg fan, but like, it was one of the few original things they had going for them. Goldberg had never been in WWF. He was somebody that they had made, and it was like well orchestrated. The fucking the pyro, the belt looked good on him. The music, the entrance with the fucking security guards and shit, and like the dolly shot, like it really worked. And the spear and the jackhammer and shit, like the Goldberg thing, even they took, you know, he didn't have a lot going on, but they hid the weakness or the limitation. And so you only saw him being a total fucking badass. You only saw him spearing the fuck out of people, which is basically like a football tackle. And then the jackhammer, you know, it's like, was just a badass move. So, I mean, to be fair, like, the dude hadn't had that much experience. Like, that's one thing as an adult I realized, like, it probably was scary for that dude. You know, Bill Goldberg, who had only been training or doing wrestling for a year or two, and all of a sudden he's in fucking Nitro, and the next thing you know, he's a world champion. And, you know, with only a year or two experience. So he's in front of thousands, tens of thousands of people, 20, 30,000 people, 40, you know. Now, you know, you get nervous in front of 10 people. Not that it would necessarily be that much scarier if, you know, that many people were there. It's hard to say, but it is hard to even maintain, like, your head and to... So, I get it. Bischoff wasn't necessarily trying to... He had some funny shit about saying, what the fuck did... He's got this thing about Dave Meltzer. He just goes on and on and on about fucking Dave Meltzer and how he hates Dave Meltzer. Dave Meltzer is some writer for Pro Wrestling Illustrated or something. He's like, what the fuck do you think is going to happen, Dave? Goldberg was going to have a 5-star match, like New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like, get real. He didn't, he just didn't have those kind of chops. That match with but Goldberg did have some fucking classic matches. The match with Hogan, where he won the belt, was like pretty amazing. It was on Nitro. If you watch that clip, it's fucking crazy. People throwing pop into the fucking ring and shit. Nitro was the South. Vince McMahon is a Yankee. He's from New York. He's from the North. Nitro is like the fucking... It's one of the most southern... WCW was fucking hillbilly, man. I mean, it's all hillbilly, but like McMahon, he's got the swagger and the kind of New York thing going on, even though he lives in Connecticut. He's like a Wall Street guy, basically. Whereas WCW is like a bunch of fucking people in a barn in overalls and shit, wrestling in the mud, practically. That's how it felt, right? They'd go to Road Wild and shit. Bischoff is into that shit. He lives in Wyoming. He keeps talking about how he wants to do acid. I'll do acid with Bischoff. He seems like a spiritual dude. I don't know, man. Even though he's like kind of a prick, you can tell. The thing that rubbed me wrong about the NWO, they seemed like the popular kids in high school or middle school. They had that vibe. The way they acted was like, we're cooler than you. We're the cool kids. You're fucking lame. We're the NWO. We got the belt. We got the TV time. And it's just like, they were just a bunch of middle-aged fucking suburban assholes. Also, man, I mean, Hogan's act was kind of tired by that point. They would just go on and on and on in these promos, and they'd eat up all this fucking TV time because that was just the vibe you got from the whole WCW culture. It was like, they're on the corporate expense account. It's Hogan, it's Nash, it's NWO, it's fucking Scott Hall. Give them the card, give them the private jet. Let them book the show. Let Hogan book it. Let Kevin Nash book it. Like, and then it just got nuts. I mean, WCW got fucking... They just threw everything at the wall with that crazy fucking entranceway and shit, and they brought the Sandman in. It's just like... It's hard to believe some of that shit. Vince Russo and Mike Awesome's in WCW all of a sudden, and he's the fucking champion somehow. And they're doing these weird cage matches with, like... They just did some crazy shit trying to save their company. But they did have some interesting things going on. The cruiserweight division in WCW was actually super dope. And that was something that the WWF really didn't prioritize or even explore. I just think Vince wasn't really that interested. They had a light heavyweight division, but it was like not... Taka Michinoku was the champion, and he was okay, but he was not like a luchador, high-flying... He would do a little bit of that stuff, but he was kind of more like a technician. I don't know. He had some kind of power moves, but he wasn't like, WCW, they got Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Ultimo Dragon. They literally just brought in all the kind of New Japan, whatever those light heavyweight tournaments they do in Japan. They brought in a lot of those guys. And props to Bischoff, because I do think he had an appreciation for that stuff. He wasn't totally just like, he's a smart guy. There's certain things that I think were personal or were blind spots. But like, all in all, I'd say he's got a pretty accurate and intelligent lay of the land as far as how he sees kind of wrestling and stuff, and how he he appreciates Jericho. You know, like he understands like what a talented guy like Dean Malenko is and shit like that. But WCW was not great at making those guys seem exciting. And to be honest, their branding, like WWF with the Attitude Era really felt like it moved into like a more mature thing. That's probably why I was attracted to it as a teenager. Whereas WCW felt kind of still like it was like a kid's show. Just like their whole their graphic design, their branding, like that was the thing that like their toys were not very good. Like their I mean WCW NWO Revenge is one of the best games best wrestling games ever made. But just like, you know, the design of I wasn't really into their design as a teenager. As a teenager, you're trying to seem, you know, more adult, or plus your hormones and shit are just raging. So like WCW was a 3-hour show. It started at 8, I think. I think it was a 3-hour show. Maybe it was only 2 hours, but I'm pretty sure it was 3 hours. I think it went from 8 to 11, but it may have only been 8 to 10. I don't remember. And then Raw would come on 9 to 11. So, but WCW was like more family friendly. It wasn't nearly as controversial. It wasn't nearly crossing the line as much. And there wasn't really sexuality. There were like the Nitro girls and shit like that. But that stuff was like, it was like the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders or something. Or, you know, the LA Laker cheerleaders. Like it was very like, once again, it's like corporate. It was like kind of cartoonish and just kind of, I don't know. There was no edge to it. It was so just like, I don't know. It wasn't, it felt old fashioned or something almost. It wasn't cool, and like, whereas like you turn on WWF and there's fucking Sable, you know, it's like, or Deborah, you know, like they didn't overdo it, but there was definitely like a little bit of that. And to be honest, it was just funnier. Like, the creative was just better. Like, WCW was kind of all over the map, and they struck gold with, like, the NWO thing. And to be honest, in retrospect, now when I look back, I probably would prefer to watch the WCW stuff. I don't know if I watched WWF Attitude stuff that I would actually, like, enjoy it the same way. The thing is, those things have actually been assimilated into, like, The Rock, right? Is the biggest fucking movie star in the world. When I first started wrestling, the thing that really got me into it, I saw The Rock Triple H ladder match at SummerSlam 97. Somehow on pay-per-view, it, like, you know, our pay-per-view, like, came in for free somehow. So I actually saw the match, and from that point on, I was like a huge fan of The Rock. And that was relatively early on. He wasn't nearly, he was just starting to catch on. And then, you know, over the next couple years, he would become a bigger star. Because his promos, pretty much. I mean, in the ring, he had a whole electrifying kind of physicality and stuff. But to be honest, like, the wrestling in WWF was a little bit, there were things that would come in that were a little more interesting. I don't know. Like, to be honest, like, I was a student of the actual wrestling. Like, I do appreciate, like, the sport itself. I am, like, that's one of the, it's a kind of a physical comedy in a way. I think in a certain way they are just clowns, actually. Like, they all have these gimmicks that are kind of cartoonish and, you know, outfits that are kind of exaggerated for cable TV. But all that shit on cable TV at the time, Comedy Central, Howard Stern, the late 90s was all kind of like edgy, right? It's for 13 to 18-year-old demographic. MTV, Beavis and Butthead. It was for all teenage, that was who the advertisers wanted, right? Axe Body Spray, or who the fuck sponsored WWF? Fucking Doritos and shit like that. Monster Energy drink probably sponsors them now. But that I'm just such an irritable kind of petty person that like now that The Rock is kind of famous and everybody loves Stone Cold Steve Austin, right? Like fucking Post Malone has got like the Austin 316 vest because he loves fucking Steve Austin. So it's like the WWF shit has kind of been assimilated into the culture in a way that like people actually think it's cool. Like, whereas Hulk Hogan nobody ever really took seriously as a movie star, right? There was sort of like that's where the culture was. We were still in this kind of mass media mainstream almost like with the presidency. We needed like a really dignified president. There was some sense that like Hulk Hogan can't be a movie star. He's not. He's a fucking pro wrestler. Like, you can't make that. It's just like it's wrestling. It's not even like a fucking legitimate form of entertainment or anything. It's just this kind of bastard hillbilly, something that's on Saturday afternoon, right? Vince McMahon really took it from being like the territories in the South and all these regions and shit into like something that was somewhat respectable and known in the mainstream through WrestleMania and pay-per-view and having Ray Charles and Muhammad Ali and Hogan, right? The Rock and Wrestling connection, getting Mr. T with Hogan, putting Hogan in the Rocky movie. Like, these were ways to sort of ingratiate wrestling into the mainstream, but that took place over the decades. I mean, not that Hulk Hogan was ever going to be a huge movie star. He probably just... I could make a good movie with Hulk Hogan. I could put Hulk... I can see... This is something Bischoff said about Hogan. He said he's a hippie at heart. He's like the least like violent guy. And I believe that. I really think Hogan, he's just a dude from... I know he's like my Uncle Pat. He's just a fucking mullet-ass, tan-ass dude from the South. Like, he wants to smoke weed and just chill, man. Like, I think Hogan gets kind of a bad rap. But considering that, like, he is, like, the fucking Babe Ruth of wrestling, like, he seems like he's a relatively chill-ass dude. Considering all the shit that he's lived through. It could be a lot worse. And I don't know. I like Hogan, man. He seems cool. Can I say that? Probably not, but whatever. I'd hang out with Hogan. I think we would get along. I'd love to write something for Hogan. But he was never going to be now. But see, now, okay, this is part of the reason why I think, looking back, the WCW, like Eric was always more into WCW. He was more into Nitro. And you can see why. These very things that I'm talking about, the characters are more kind of cartoonish. There's makeup. WWF was kind of scary. Things like Kane and The Undertaker, they'd crucify people, Gangrel and shit. They wanted to play in that kind of like Marilyn Manson, Kid Rock, Eminem, horrorcore space. They wanted to go there a little bit. WCW really wasn't any kind of like scary thing that happened, like Ming or like Vader was kind of, I don't know, Halloween Havoc. It was like cartoonish and like Universal Studios or something. It wasn't like some fucking, borderline. WWF would just do kind of weird shit. Like, what was the thing where the old lady gave birth to a hand? Like, that was just fucking weird. McMahon went for that kind of stuff for a few years. Right before 9/11 and before he went really corporate, he really went berserk with just weird-ass storylines and, like, him doing crazy shit. I really do want to talk about Bischoff, but I also want to talk about how ECW plays into all this. Because Bischoff is sort of like a WCW version of McMahon. He's got the same kind of like, I don't know, he's almost like a cartoon character, or he's just a prick. He's like the dude in Die Hard, right? He's like Hans Booby, I'm your white knight. You can totally see Bischoff saying that. But like, I don't know what it is about this podcast or him that's like really drawn me in, because he's not really like, he's not an exaggerated character, you know, like of all the things that I've done deep dives or like binged over the past few months, like Howard Stern, right? Or even that all gas no brakes thing. Like, they're kind of exaggerated, they're kind of pronounced. Whereas like Bischoff's podcast, it's like he's not, he's kind of a caricature of like a slimy exec, but also like you're hearing his his reasoning. That's really what this show is. This 83 weeks, they go through different things. Like, they'll do an entire episode on one Nitro or one pay-per-view or one wrestler or something, and they'll just talk. And the show is like 2-3 hours. It's got more commercials than any fucking other podcast I've ever heard. And the commercials are kind of like seamlessly interwoven, so like they'll just be talking about, you know, fucking Flair or whatever, and then they'll just start talking about like a grill. And then they'll talk about the grill for literally like 5 minutes. They'll be like, this fucking grill, like, I use it in Wyoming at my house, and, you know, really, I was cooking some bison burgers for the guys, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, Jesus Christ. You gotta fast forward on your fucking, you know, app. Your, podcasting app. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, well, I'm partially just fascinated by Bischoff as a character, I guess, but like he's kind of hard to get a handle on, because he's not that exaggerated, but there are things about him that actually are kind of like, you know, like he's an executive. He's traveled to all these places. You know, he's gone to Japan. He really knows a lot about Sturgis and the culture there. And it's like, you know, even though he kind of looks like a yuppie, and he just seems like he could be an executive for, I don't know, fucking MTV or something, or I don't know, VH1. Like, he's in wrestling, and he really gets involved. He's in the matches and shit, right? And, you know, he lays everything out in such corporate speak. Turner Broadcasting and all this, you know, and so it really is this corporate culture. And so he's kind of an example of that, I would say. He's a funny kind of example of that kind of corporate workplace, corporate methods of, like, he was talking about how you need a show Bible. Every TV show has got a Bible for each season where they have the story. Here's the A storyline. It gets 20% of your television time. Then you have the B storyline. That gets 15%. Your C storyline, that's in yellow, that's 15%. Your D storyline, etc., etc. And it's like, you kind of see why he does this, but it's also just like, he's into focus groups and that kind of thing. And so you can see how that influenced, with some of the decision making, you can tell they did it because they just wanted to do it, and they did it for themselves. And then they justify other shit by being like, well, this person wasn't ready, or, you know, there was this thing where they're talking about how the NWO had this promo where they made fun of the Four Horsemen. And it was kind of mean, I guess. They dressed up like them, and they just made fun of, you know, their families and shit. And made fun of how they're old and shit. And the NWO didn't really get to, or the Four Horsemen didn't really get to, like, retort or anything. They didn't come out and, like, beat him up or fight back or anything. It's like, the guy who's the co-host is pretty good about the questions he asks because it's so in-depth. I mean, they literally go step by step through every fucking thing that ever happened, and they ask Bischoff point blank, like, why did you do this? You know, like, why did you fucking have Kevin Nash beat Goldberg with the taser? Like, that was the stupidest. I couldn't believe they did that, man, because it was such a fucking... Goldberg, that streak had gone on forever, and literally, first of all, Nash shouldn't have been the guy. Like, it was just a wasted opportunity. Like, Goldberg had like, for somebody to beat him, it could have been very meaningful. And not to say that it was going to be a clean pin, but like, they could have got a lot more out of it than they did. It felt like a throwaway. And it felt like ego-stroking Kevin Nash, who I think was probably the head booker at the time. That was at Starrcade, like, 98 or 99 or something. I watched it live at my grandma's house. And, it pissed me off when it happened. I mean, one of the things as I get older that I realize is, like, it is probably really hard for these guys to work together. I mean, Kevin Nash is like almost 7 feet fucking tall. He's over 300 pounds. Like, that is a huge human being. You can't just throw him in a match with Billy Kidman or Ric Flair because it's like, what the fuck are they going to do the whole time? So it's like, Kevin Nash was like, we weren't going to have fucking the Four Horsemen run out. They weren't brawlers. It's not who they were. They're technicians. And it's like, bullshit, dude. Like, they're the Four Horsemen. They fucking play dirty and they beat people up in cages and shit. Like, they would have come out. It was a result of having all the fucking dudes in the NWO in the office making all the decisions. Like, there should have been... It just would have helped them have a stronger storyline. Bischoff's all about story and character. And I'm a storyteller. It's all about the storytelling, the in-ring psychology. He's trying to be Hollywood. All those guys are really trying to be Hollywood. All those fucking WCW guys are obsessed with Hollywood and the movies. I mean the film industry. I don't mean a Hollywood Hogan. Bischoff was talking about how he kept an apartment in Santa Monica. He was out there all the time on business. Like, for what? Fucking WCW's in Atlanta, Georgia, man. Like, you get an apartment in Santa Monica, California? That's, like, a pretty long flight. Fucking Bischoff. It's hilarious, man. I wish I could get more of a read on the guy. Because he's just fucking hilarious. Like, he's just he's not really like a prick, but like, he's just got that kind of air of like yuppie. I think that's what makes him like a good heel. And his look and everything is just funny. I don't know. I guess I relate to him maybe in some way. If I were the closest, if there's anybody that, you know, I could, like he's 5'10", I think. He's not that big. Like, Bischoff is probably the closest thing to somebody like me in the wrestling, and he's actually in there throwing down. You know, he's getting in the mix with fucking Dennis Rodman and Hogan and fucking Jay Leno and shit. It's interesting to hear him talk about... I listened to the episode, of course, about the Jay Leno thing. That, honestly, I think that was the thing that got me back into wrestling. Because it was national news. I was into comedy. And then all of a sudden, fucking wrestling's on the Tonight Show, and Hogan's like, you know, wearing these clothes and shit. I hadn't, you know, wrestling was not on my radar at all. But I knew who Hogan was from my childhood, and I loved Hogan, you know. And fast forward, now I'm 12 years old. Hogan's back. He's with Karl Malone and shit, and Jay Leno, and so Bischoff is talking about. So that's when I got the first wrestler I liked when I started watching it was DDP, because he was fighting against Hogan and shit. I don't know. I didn't know anything about wrestling. For some reason, I liked DDP. I don't know why. This thing, bam. But I quickly got over that. As soon as I saw the ladder match with The Rock, that's when I got into WWF. And WWF Warzone, when that game came out, was bad as fuck. I was obsessed with that game. I'd play it. Because I think that was the first American game with a creator wrestler. The game was awesome as fuck, man. WWF Warzone. I love that game. For Nintendo 64, I'd play it right now if I had it. So anyway, yeah, fucking, he's talking about Jay Leno, right? And he said something about, I don't know, he was at a meeting with somebody else, and Jay Leno was there, and he's like, "Do you want to do wrestling?" And Leno's like, "Yeah, I'll do some wrestling." And who the fuck cares? Who knows? Fuck Leno. I heard he's into like getting spanked and shit, so maybe that was part of it. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They'd have to update the Seinfeld episode to be about like kink shaming or something. He's into I don't even know any of it. I don't know. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He's a power bottom. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He's into bondage and getting abused. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Jay Leno is. So anyway, it was just ridiculous. I kind of can't believe that the Tonight Show went for that, actually, because I think WCW got way more out of it than the Tonight Show did. I think Jay Leno was probably trying to appear young and edgy and cool and give his show some kind of like, you know, a little bit of like a badass kind of edge. Plus, he's just into cars and that whole thing, and they were going to Sturgis. They did the match at Road Wild, so like that probably played into it, the motorcycles and all that shit. Bischoff's like, people think Sturgis is like a bunch of, you know, bikers that don't know shit. It's like, who do you think has enough money to take 2 weeks off work to go to South Dakota for 2 weeks? It's doctors, it's lawyers, it's professionals, business owners, executives. These are the people who go to Sturgis. These are the people who are at Road Wild. Not fucking a bunch of, you know, hillbilly bikers. We've been misled, or we're the mainstream media. He doesn't have a lot of respect for ECW. He doesn't like the gore, I think, which I don't like either. But I also just think he didn't think it was a good product. But I do want to talk about ECW. Have I talked about wrestling? Maybe we should talk about other shit. But I'll talk about ECW real fast, and that'll be kind of my way to wrap this up. Because, to be honest, ECW was one of my favorite things that has happened within my lifetime, I would say. Anywhere. Culturally, anywhere. It was a highly, highly well done and intelligent blend of wrestling styles and just, like, entertainment show. Like, it wasn't, people, you might think ECW was just this kind of, like, violent extreme. And to be honest, like, that was first of all, I wouldn't even say that that's what my big takeaway was. By the time I started watching it, the really extreme shit had already happened, like those barbed wire matches with Terry Funk and Sabu and shit. There was some crazy shit that was happening, but it wasn't nearly. I wasn't around when I wasn't watching wrestling when all that shit happened. That was like in the mid 90s. I started ECW I really got into in like 98, 99. It was not easy to watch in those days. Somehow I had this fucking TV in my room. I got channel 19, which was a fucking UHF station on a fucking, antenna TV. It didn't even have an antenna. It was literally a fucking TV with like dials that you clicked. It turned. Cha-chunk, like a rotary phone almost. And magically, it got this fucking channel 19, which was like a small ass fucking station. I think it was in the Levesque Tower, actually. And they showed wrestling they showed Music City Wrestling and a few other wrestling promotions on Saturday night. I couldn't believe it. It was like a miracle. And they would show ECW every Saturday night at fucking midnight. They'd show ECW. I could not fucking believe it. It was like one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. To this day, actually. The fact that... And it was before the TNN show. When ECW went on TNN, it was already kind of over, to be honest. Like, I wasn't really into the Rhino ECW shit. That shit all kind of sucked. After about 99 or 2000, it was not really any good. But on Channel 19, it was lit as fuck. Any match where they're in the Madhouse of the Extreme... They'd find the most interesting venues, for one thing. Their television presentation was always very interesting. And even though it was kind of a lo-fi approach or a garage band approach, a low-budget approach, it was highly aesthetic and highly visually stimulating. It wasn't slick in the way that, like, WCW was. It wasn't flush with all that kind of, like, corporate... exec kind of energy. It did feel more like a garage band or like, but it was beautiful. The mat, the blue mat, and the way it bounced, the action of the ECW ring. Like, I really think Paul Heyman is he's probably my favorite. I mean, I don't know how much you would attribute. I would guess probably most of who's responsible for ECW would have to be Paul Heyman. But to me, he's probably my favorite, like, artist in wrestling, as far as just, like, his vision. Like, ECW was, you would watch the pay-per-view, and it would really be an amazing show from start to finish. And it was almost like a tour through all these different styles. The ones I saw, they would start with Super Crazy and Yoshihiro Tajiri, and they would do these unbelievable matches. Like, there was such excitement in the ECW arena, which is a fucking totally magical place. I've never been there, but I hope to go one day, because it's hard to believe. I really don't think it could even exist now, actually. Like, they pushed things so far, but they were still doing it on, like, a legit level. Like, they were the third promotion in this country. They got to that level. Like, even though they were doing shit that, like, to be honest, I don't even think would be legal anymore. Like, the shit that New Jack did, or, like, the shit that, like, Balls Mahoney and Axl Rose, or whatever the fuck, whatever the fuck that guy's name is. Rotten. Oh my god, it was so trashy. But it, like everything, I suppose, in my life, it has this kind of, like, impoverished way, but, like, it's able to whip up this amazing dish out of just, like, the cheapest ingredients. Like, they were so smart. Like, Heyman was so passionate and so intelligent about the wrestling business. and he knew all the different styles. He would bring guys in from, Benoit. He really, what happened with wrestling is the same shit that happens in all art and gentrification, which is like Heyman brought in talent from the different regions. He would spot guys like Lance Storm or Chris Jericho or Perry Saturn or Raven or whoever the fuck who was working in, God knows, Smoky Mountain Wrestling or somewhere that's in Japan or FMW or who the fuck knows, Jim Cornette. And he'd find these people and he'd bring them to Philadelphia and he'd put together these unbelievable, because he just let these guys rip. He just let them, and you can tell the vibe at the ECW shows is just everybody is so fucking, like, excited. The people are just so thrilled, and it takes on this special kind of magical quality because they know what they're doing is like the most exciting, probably the best work they'll ever do. Like, it's just good. It's just good work. The storylines were great. The matches, I mean, I don't agree necessarily with this idea that they're just a bunch of high spots. Like, people dismiss Rob Van Dam. They say, he's just kind of like a bunch of high spots. I don't agree. I think, Rob Van Dam is probably one of my top 3 favorite wrestlers, to be honest. What the guy did is unbelievable. And I don't think it really was, like, he's not just, like, stunts. I think there is something to be said, like, this is something Kevin Nash said. He's like, when Mick Foley went off the cage, that was when a work became a stunt. People ask me who's the greatest worker of all time. I say Hulk Hogan. That's what Kevin Nash said. And I think he's right in a way. Like, the idea is you're not supposed to get hurt. The idea is it's a work. So you pretend, like Flair. They were doing an interview with Flair, and it's like Flair said he doesn't have, like, any kind of, like, pain, really. He doesn't live with any kind of, like, chronic pain because he's never had any major injuries. Knock on wood. And it's like, that's because Flair's a good worker. Whereas Mick Foley, when he jumped off the fucking Hell in a Cell or got thrown off, it's like, that did change the game, and I don't know. I like the high flying shit. I like high spots. I like huge bumps. I don't even think I knew what in-ring psychology was, whereas now I think I probably would understand that more. I got really into a lot of the Japanese stuff, New Japan, All Japan, Misawa, and all that stuff, Pura Risu, because that stuff is all about in-ring psychology and the storytelling of what it all, every move and the injury, that it does, kind of lingers and stays. Those guys are really the best in the world at that kind of stuff. But Paul Heyman was a student, you could tell. He would bring guys in from, I think he brought in Rey Mysterio, Psychosis. Who's the one guy? The Great Sasuke. Did he ever have Jushin Liger in a match? I'm not sure if he had Jushin Liger. But didn't he have Hayabusa? They did like a tag match, RVD and Sabu versus Hayabusa and somebody else. Like, you're never going to see that again. Like, that, it doesn't get any better than that. For me. For my fucking, that's the kind of shit that I like. Like, and to be honest, like, you don't see that stuff in WWF. WWF is committed to, I think, more than anything, they're committed to their own characters and, like, building the characters. And they really take a lot of care to do that. like, to come up with gimmicks, theme songs, set it up on TV, and make, like, a good product. I think McMahon has respect for wrestling, and he's like, you know, he's talent scouting and shit. I mean, I've never actually seen the NXT thing that much, but from what I've seen, they basically just do like those light heavyweight 16-man round robin Super J Cup or whatever the fuck it is they do in Japan. NXT seems like it does a lot of that stuff. It seems like it brings in styles from all over the world. Light heavyweights, not just, the typical WWF superstar is, like, huge. Maybe not necessarily, like, as big as, like, Kevin Nash or The Undertaker or something, but, like, The Rock is huge. Stone Cold Steve Austin is a big guy. Like, he's 230, 40, 50 pounds. Shawn Michaels, 230 pounds, 6 feet tall. And he's, like, small. Bret Hart is probably somewhere 5'10 or something, 235. He's, like, small. Benoit, I think, is probably 5'7 or something. He was, like, 210 or 220. He was small for WWF. But it was just interesting to see how all of the different promotions and stuff ended up kind of weaving together when the Monday Night Wars basically ended and everybody surrendered to McMahon. Heyman joined. All the WCW guys joined. Now there's shit like TNA and AEW, I guess, where, there's always going to be places for people to go where they don't necessarily want to work for Vince McMahon, but yeah, the way the ECW pay-per-views, those Taz and Sabu matches were insanely good. The way that Taz would suplex, that was like a totally unique thing to him. Throwing Sabu through the tables. First of all, the tables. I mean, if there's one thing that I might associate or remember about ECW, if I had to sum up ECW in one word, I'd say tables. Because it was all about tables. And I loved it, man. There's nothing better than a fucking table spot. As far as I'm concerned. A table spot is as good as it gets. Fuck the in-ring psychology. Give me a fucking table spot any day of the week. Should I go to the other room or something? So you'd see Super Crazy, who's Lucha Libre, and Tajiri, who's from Japan. That's the first match. Then you'd have Axel Rotten and Ian Rotten come in, and they'd fight the FBI, the Guido guys. And so you'd have a tag match where it was like weapons and shit. Then you'd have New Jack come in, he'd beat the fuck out of somebody, he'd jump off a balcony, for Christ's sakes. That was like his one thing. He'd come in with a shopping cart. So it'd be a totally different thing. It'd be a totally different flavor. Plus the music, it was all actual contemporary music, and so it just rocked the fucking house. With New Jack, they'd play like whatever it was, fucking Dr. Dre or whatever. That match, in a New Jack match, you're not even going to see a wrestling move. You're going to see punching and hitting with weapons and a jump off a balcony, and that's it. He's not even going to do a fucking move. He might draw color. That's what they call bleeding. Getting color. Kind of interesting. Then they'd have whatever the fuck, RVD and Jerry Lynn, who would just put on like unbelievable combinations. They'd go through fucking tables, RVD. First of all, ECW doesn't have any pads outside the ring, which I always thought was completely insane. because the other wrestling organizations do, and they don't need them nearly as bad. Every fucking ECW match, some motherfuckers jumping over the ropes or off the ropes, out into the crowd, getting all fucked up in like the fucking guardrails and shit. It's like, I don't know how those guys did that. Literally just doing like somersault planches onto the concrete. Like, there's no way that they didn't get like incredibly fucked up. I suppose they were probably so full of adrenaline, and RVD smoked shitloads of weed, and they're probably all on painkillers and God knows what else. But I can't believe these motherfuckers like doing swan dive fucking planches and shit right into the concrete. Shane Douglas, Francine. I loved Lance Storm. He was like one of my favorites. And he had a completely different style. He was kind of like, he was trained by Stu Hart in the dungeon, but he had a lot of nice kind of kicks. He had wrestled in Japan. He could do aerial shit, but he wasn't really doing flips and stuff. I was really into that stuff. I was into the move sets and the kind of specificity of the individual wrestler style. When you got to WCW and when you got to the higher, like Hogan, right? It's like, especially at that time, there wasn't a whole lot of variety to like the moves and shit he was gonna do. Like Hogan wasn't gonna do a fucking double underhook belly to back suplex or some kind of crazy shit. Hogan wasn't even gonna do a DDT. Like, those guys in the 70s and 80s, the movesets were way more limited. It was all like headlocks, arm bars, twisting people's arms and shit like that. It would just be a bunch of holds and shit for like minutes at a time. I don't even know why people watched it. But Hogan comes from that era, so it's like he's got about 7 or 8 moves, and that's about it, It's just the in-ring psychology and how you shuffle that stuff around. Whereas somebody like Lance Storm, it was like the dude would pull out all kinds of shit. They'd do interesting kind of reversals. He had a lot of different kicks that he would do. In his boots, he had like shin guards on his boots, so it's like that was what he was highlighting, He had a strong upper body so he could do German suplexes and shit, but then he'd do like a spinning wheel kick off the top rope. You wouldn't see people do a lot of that kind of stuff. Aerial guys were doing like 450 splashes or moonsaults or this or that. Lance Storm had kind of a little bit of an idiosyncratic style for... Plus, he had a fucking podcast. Like, back in the 90s, I would listen to Lance Storm on Real Player. He had, like, a thing every week where he'd just talk about, what he was doing, him out on the road, being at Cracker Barrel and shit. But eventually, of course, he got... So, Paul Heyman would recognize his talent. He'd bring him into ECW, Philadelphia. It's cheap to operate out of there. He could edit the show in his fucking house. Like, it was his thing, right? It was his ideas, and it was almost like a public access show. It's like... But it was dope as fuck. I mean, their video in the days before, the viral and TikTok, I mean, ECW's like highlight reel is fucking crazy. Just watch the opening. It'll blow your mind that you're just like, when I first saw it, it's like, I can't believe these guys are doing these flips into the crowd. Like, WCW had high-flying guys and it would do, and WWF would have kind of interesting things wrestling-wise. They'd have ladder matches or like you know, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels would have good matches, but, like, they weren't doing shit like this. You know, Rob Van Dam was like Shawn Michaels times 10. Shawn Michaels might do some kind of plancha or something to the outside over the rope, but, like, he's not going to, like, do a fucking flip out into the crowd that's, like, incredibly reckless, and he's, like, jumping 20 feet, for Christ's sake. Like, Rob Van Dam would do 10 things every match that were just, like, completely insane. To the point that it was, like, it really was shocking. It was, like, I can't, you know, Sabu, Jesus Christ. What a fucking genius that guy is. I mean, Sabu, that guy is one of the most mysterious, magical people on fucking planet Earth. His gimmick, I mean, he's hilarious, man. And just, like, his flow through the ring, the way he, you know, the triple jump thing with his headband and shit, like, Sabu was a big part of the ECW magic. That's for sure. He was kind of like the soul of ECW, I feel like. I don't think he ever had much of a career in WCW or WWF. Sabu was kind of too raw for that shit. Rob Van Dam eventually had his, like... But, you know, he was WWF champion, and he was, like... He's a, you know... He was, like, the top guy at the company, sort of, for a second in the 2000s. So he made it to the top. I think it does take time. I mean, that's another thing, just, like... In a certain way, I think wrestling is a metaphor. It's like a lens for me to look at my own life through, as far as, like, you know, what I'm doing with my KGB show is like it's a Monday Night Raw. And it's high stakes, and it's like, it's all about ratings and money. I mean, wrestling, the Monday Night Wars were all about ratings and sponsors and, like, selling t-shirts and putting on a fucking hell of a show. And what are we going to do this week? You know, wrestling does have this quality that's kind of like, hey, let's put on a show and, like, let's make it up as we go. You know, I do think that wrestling is an improvisation, actually. And that's a big part of it. That's part of the beauty of wrestling. And I think that's one of the things that attracts me to it. Even though the endings of the matches might be somewhat preordained, although not always. I mean, I think the outcome is preordained, but not necessarily how it's going to go down. That's something that could be improvised. And in fact, I think, you know, 90% of wrestling is improvised. And so that's a lot like music. That's a lot like the other things that I'm drawn to. But it's a lens, like Bischoff being an executive, talking about how they did it. And just like, you know, I think with anything, it's like you get a run. As long as it lasts, it lasts. And so just even getting to do it. Like Bischoff had 83 weeks, right? For 83 weeks, WCW was the #1 company. And Bischoff did that. He was the president or whatever at the time. And, you know, then the company ended and got swallowed up by WWF, but they did it. Anything is like that. You just keep it going as long as you can. And I think what happened with ECW is what happens with any art thing. It was a passion project because Heyman did it on his own terms. He had creative control for the most part. And they had great ideas. I mean, he's a visionary. And they revolutionized wrestling. And WCW and WWF just copied what they were doing. And, you know, for what WCW did to WWF, you could say WWF did a similar thing to WCW. I mean, Steve Austin was in ECW. A lot of the WWF guys. And just the whole vibe of WWF. They really, the whole attitude thing was kind of taking its lead from ECW. So it's just like anything. It's a poor neighborhood. It's a place of, it's Philadelphia. It's not New York. It's not Turner Broadcasting Systems. It's someplace they can go. They have their own arena. They have their own TV. They have their own contracts with different markets, Channel 19. And they do whatever the fuck they want. They got the Eliminators. They got the Dudleys. They got Too Cold Scorpio. Some of the shit that guy was doing was nuts, man. They'd have those Masato Tanaka, Mike Awesome matches where those guys would just be power bombing the fuck out of each other. They just power bomb them over the top rope onto the concrete floor. That was the shit that when I saw it, I just like, I cannot fucking believe this shit. How are these guys like not just hospitalized? Like, there's no way you can do this. Like, it's just, they're beating the fuck out of each other, man. Those elbows that Tanaka would do, that's the kind of shit that is subtle. There's nuance to that. So it's working on both levels, right? And they kept it going as long as they could. You know, ECW burned bright for 6, 7, 8 years, and then they sold the brand to WWF, and Paul Heyman fucking, you know, was the announcer for Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns and shit. And now everybody knows who he is, you know. It's just, you know, I stopped watching wrestling, like I said, in like 99, I'd say, maybe 2000. Somewhere around in there. And, how's this look? Right around the point that, like, they all joined up with WWF. Like, and it's just amazing to me that they all were able to work together and cooperate and shit. You know, because in the 90s, it was like ECW's here, WWF is here, WCW is here. And they're all competing, and, like, it seemed like the, you know, where the talent was and who they worked for and the transactions of that were actually really important. That's why the behind-the-scenes stuff was so important to read about, because it was just like, it felt like it mattered in the competitive sense. You know, if a wrestler got too big for ECW and then they went up to, like, one of the big two or whatever, if somebody left WWF to go to WCW, that was like, whoa, holy shit. This could change the whole balance of everything. I should probably talk. I'm going to talk about my gigs and shit. So I had did I talk about the open mic already? I had open mic Monday, and then I had the Dime Show Tuesday. Maybe I talked about them already. Did I do one of these yet? What the fuck did I do this week? I worked on some videos today. I got some nice stuff coming along. A new September song, my September piece with New York Poetry Festival, and my feature set. I bounced that today, so I will be uploading it soon. I've got a lot of exciting premieres tonight. Wavetable, or I'm sorry. Wow, whoops. System Lord at the local in Queens premiered. And then tomorrow night, the second open mic premieres live on this YouTube page for my 100 subscribers out there. NWO. Were we ever so lucky to live in a time where the NWO and D-Generation X existed simultaneously? And then ECW was also happening? It's hard to... We were so lucky. I could talk... Maybe I should just do a wrestling podcast. I don't know. I've been so weirdly sentimental about it. I don't know why. I think it's like escapism, I guess. Because poetry is such a bitter... I don't know. I'm just so bitter about poetry, so I think wrestling is like a place for me to... But I don't know. I think it's also just kind of an infantilization. I think there's something about wrestling that's like... It's for infantilized people. I think that's one reason why it's so popular in this country. I mean, it really is a big form of entertainment. It's not just like content. I mean, or this weird sports entertainment sport thing. It's like wrestling is as big as baseball or fucking... It's definitely bigger than poetry is. There's a huge audience and this and that, but I would have liked to have done more performances this week, although I did Monday and Tuesday. I feel bad because if I would have done yesterday and today, that means I would have had 18 performances in September, which would have matched my record in August. I had 18 shows in August. And having 18 this month, plus I worked 4 days. Oh, I should talk about that too. So I only did 16 shows in September. I guess, is it technically? Yeah, I think it is October. It just recently turned October. So I did 16 shows in September. So not as many. Although there's only 30 days in September. But I don't know. I was just going so hard for so long, and my body just needed to recover, and I had shows Monday. I had the open mic, which is a lot of pressure, because it's like I got to keep it going. I got to get people to come out. I got to get them to spend money, and I'm learning as I go, And then Tuesday I had the dime show, and then Wednesday I had to work at the Bunker on Bowery. And so yesterday and today, well, yesterday, oh man, should I show this on camera? Probably not, but I got the hookup yesterday. And I even went to an open mic. I went to this open mic at Comedy Shop, but I didn't sign up or anything. It was not forthcoming. The list. But I've had this video, this September video, for like a few weeks, and I haven't been finishing it. And I've gotten in a rhythm with my videos, so I'm comfortable with it. But like, I also I need to kind of get it out there, and I've got new video shit that I want to work on coming in. So, the video's it's been 75% finished for 2 weeks or, a week and a half or something. And it's just been kind of sitting there. Because I've been trying to get outside and do as much as I can before the summer's over. And before the weather gets cold and before, things change. But... And, my focus has just been on live performances. I try to edit the videos where I can, but I really wanted, and I want to be outside, and so now that the weather's kind of, I mean, it's been cold the last few days, so I'm kind of wanting to stay inside. I don't even want to go outside, so it kind of gives me an excuse to, like, today I really banged out a lot of video, and I think it's pretty good. This new video September song. Uh, I'm getting into. I kind of know what I need to do, and I'm probably gonna go back if I have time. Hopefully, I'm hoping that I get to stay here till March 1st, or and because that would really give me time. This place is just such a good studio, and last winter I really was able to get a lot of video stuff done, and that's how I was able to get those long projects done, those 3 and 4 hour and 5 hour long travel logs and shit, because like I had time and space here to really just like having this much space to live in. I think just like inspires that kind of work to come out. Living in that tiny room, I think I wanted to make everything small and unobtrusive, whereas like uh I want to go back and this winter record all of my diaries from the past year, all of my New York writing, and lay it over all of the videos that I've made so far, like I've done with these videos. And so it makes one long poem of the whole thing. So you'll have the original videos which don't have the poem, and then you'll have a version of the videos with the poem over it. So you can watch both, but that way it'll be like a 20-hour long poem about New York. So, if I have some time, and the weather's not great, I can sort of burrow in here, and now I've got, a good supply of this and that, and I can just record myself reading my diaries. I'd like to publish it, but that will be how I publish it, in the meantime. But I think having the poem voiceover gives a normal, or it definitely poetry people into the videos. And to be honest, I just think that it's actually like, I think it's probably like the first fully realized version of my poetry, actually, is like these videos. Like, this is what it's meant to be. This is how it makes sense. It's like this long, and it accompanies the visual and kind of interplays with it. But it's also just like this kind of listenable music that certain things leap out to you here and there. It's a podcast. It's a thought cast, right? Uh, and it's a depiction of inner monologue. Uh, so anyway, what the fuck was I talking about? ECW, Bischoff. The show on Tuesday was very wrestling inspired. I broke my glasses. I stepped on them. They finally fucking. It was only a matter of time. I mean, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. But that's the second pair of glasses I broke this year. I ordered some new ones the other day. They'll be here in 14 to 21 days. So I'm going to be using these fucking taped up shits for... Yeah, the open mic is growing steadily. It went really well. It was very magical on Monday. Getting into a groove, I'm starting to, it's watching the video back. It's like I was nervous, and like it's picking up steam, this week I'm excited. I'm always excited, but I'm starting to get over being nervous, right? The bar is a little bit. We almost hit our target financially last week, so the bar is like starting to get behind it a little bit. I'm hoping that it just blows up. I put up a bunch of flyers because there were these two girls at the show on Monday, and I, just I don't know if I asked them or what, but they said that they came to the show because they saw the flyer. They didn't want to perform. I think I asked them if they want to perform, and they were like, "No, we just came to watch," and they bought drinks. And she said they saw the flyer on University Place, which I honestly don't think I put one in University Place. I put one on Broadway just north of Union Square, which is like if University Place were to continue, that's technically what it would be. So maybe I put it over by that movie theater and like the Chipotle and stuff. The AMC movie theater and the Chipotle. But that was like a light went off to me, like, oh, the flyers are actually working. Like, you can hang them up and think, ooh, am I just doing this for fun? Like, what is the point of this? But the fact that I had somebody there that was like, we came because of the flyer. Because of the flyer we saw that was like attached to a pole. Then I was like, oh shit, these things actually work. And so I just think, well, I'm trying to get people from every which way I can. I'm trying to get people from the comedy Facebook group message boards, from the poetry Facebook group message boards. I'm trying to go to the open mics, go to Hillis's thing, tell people there, tell people at the Neuronautic thing, tell people at every open mic I go to. I get musicians to come, have KGB share it, have them get people to come. Do the flyers. I had a guy message me today saying he saw the flyer. So when I went to Ridgewood, because these girls said they fucking saw the flyer, I was like, okay, these flyers do something. So let's put some. I was going to Brooklyn and Queens, Ridgewood, and so I was like, I haven't put any flyers out there, and I would like to get people from Brooklyn to come. I don't go out there that often, a couple times a month. And so I don't have that much opportunity to hang shit, right? But I had time before the gig and I was going out there anyway. So I got off at Morgan Stop and I hung a bunch over there by the lofts, the McKibben lofts, and by Human Relations and by Molasses and all up and down Wilson and, is that Knickerbocker? Whatever that other street is, over by Myrtle Wyckoff and all that shit. And down in Ridgewood. Well, partially, the reason why I did is because there's tons of musicians. I mean, that area is where all of the fucking people my age who do this are. I mean, if they can still afford it. And so I thought, that's who I'm trying to attract. I'm trying to attract young, cool art people, interesting musicians, interesting whatever. And Manhattan, there's some of that, but I'd like to get more Brooklyn and more. I'd like to make it. I mean, it's been dope. I've loved it, but I would like to have a little bit more cool, eclectic, young shit in the mix. In addition to the kind of eccentric Manhattan and like comedy and things. And the music's been beautiful, but it would be cool to get some stuff that's a little more, I don't know, avant-garde or. So I hung up a bunch of fucking flyers all throughout. Over by where we used to live, over by the library and shit in Ridgewood, the Bernadette Mayer Public Library. Under the elevated over by Topos Books. So some guy messaged me on Instagram today saying he wanted to sign up and he saw the fucking flyer. And I think he looked like a cool DJ guy or something from Brooklyn. Like he lived in Williamsburg or Bushwick or East Williamsburg or whatever. I mean, I gotta say that, like, I don't have that much social media presence, so, like, the promotion is not quite as easy for me. Like, a lot of these events that they do, a lot of literary events, but, like, a lot of the events that they do at KGB, too, it's like the people that book it have 2,000-3,000 followers. Like, a lot of the people in the reading might. Multiple people reading might have thousands, tens of thousands of followers. So they can get 60, 70 people to come to a reading, no problem. Between all the people sharing it and promoting it and shit. Whereas me, it's like, I have 480 followers, 60 of which have followed me in the last week because KGB's been promoting the event. And that's it. KGB has a few thousand. So between us, that's all the reach we have. So it's like, I'm not an influencer. I'm not an influencer, okay? I'm willing to admit it. I'm not an influencer. Let me reiterate. Or I am, but not in that way. But, so the promotion, it's not that easy for me to get 50, 60 people to come out. Last time, I think we had about 30 people. I'm looking at this list, I think about 20 of them signed up in advance. And right now, as of now, I have 15 people signed up for Monday. And most of them signed up on Tuesday. Almost nobody has signed up in the last few days. So I'm like, how am I going to build this? It's the crowds have been a mix of people that I know personally, comedians from Facebook groups, people that know people that I know, or people that I've read with or met at like open mics and shit. And then people that found out about it through like the KGB sharing it. And then the like as far as I know, those girls were the only people who came who saw the flyer. But maybe they weren't the only ones. I don't know. Other people might have come too. I mean, I wanted to get more spread over the city. Basically all the events I've done, the only place I've even hung flyers have been like in the East Village and the West Village. Basically. I barely ever go anywhere else. So, because I was in Brooklyn and I was going from East Williamsburg to Ridgewood, that's a pretty good swath, for those type of musicians and things, and those type of artists. They all pretty much pass through there, probably. I'm hoping that it really takes off. Like, we're doing great shows. I'm probably going to start to do, like, features whenever I feel like it. Or is convenient or whatever. Okay, what else do I need to talk about? Oh, yeah, I need to talk about Wednesday. Okay, so Wednesday, I get a text on Tuesday saying, we need a video person to run slides during this Karen Finley performance at the Bunker, which is where William S. Burroughs lived when he lived in New York in the 70s, 222 Bowery, in the building that John Giorno, he owns. I think Giorno owns 2 lofts and the Bunker. And so this is literally where fucking William S. Burroughs lived. And the building is an amazing fucking building. It was a YMCA 100 and whatever, 30 years ago, 100 years ago. And John Giorno, right, the great, one of my heroes, he owned and he lived in 2 of the lofts, and William Burroughs lived in the basement or in the Bunker, which is like, it was a boys' locker room, I guess. In the fucking bathroom. I mean, it's all how he left it. It's all how it was when he lived there. There's his rifle lamp and his fucking Burroughs typewriter and his organ box and the whole deal. And the orange chairs from the totally corrupt John Giorno. But they've turned it into like, it's sort of a combination of like a Buddhist event space. I went and did a meditation there. It's in the show in March. I did a guided meditation back in March. And it literally is this fucking place, right? I mean, there's pictures of it in that Victor Bockris book with like Mick Jagger and Patti Smith and Warhol and all these fucking people, right? And so they need me to go and run slides for Karen Finley, who's a performance artist, who, to be honest, I'm not that familiar with, but I did buy 2 of her books uh, last year because she read at the Poetry Project at the Samuel R. Delaney reading in 2019, and so I filmed her, but I didn't really know who she was, and then I was sort of reading a little bit about her last year, and I thought, oh, I have to have these books. It just sounded very similar. Like, she's a performance artist, but she does drawings, and she's a poet, and so it felt very similar to what I was doing in certain ways, and so I thought, I need to buy these books. And I haven't really read them that much, but, you know, they're inspiring and super cool, the way she does visual art and poetry and stuff. And so, you know, I don't, to be honest, I don't generally like doing this kind of stuff. You know, this is one reason why I haven't gone to my actual job yet, because it's just so stressful. Like, doing video is one thing because nobody really can tell if you're fucking up. Like, you could fuck the whole video thing up and, like, no one's even gonna know about it till afterwards. Whereas, like, if you're running sound or you're like doing a projector or something, it's like if you fuck up, everybody's gonna see it, and it could fuck the whole show up, right? If there's feedback, if something doesn't work or something goes wrong, it's like you could destroy the whole fucking show. And so I don't really like doing that stuff, actually. um, it's just a lot of pressure. And especially as something that's like as cool, and there's just such a like sense of decorum and just like everything works as like the Poetry Project or this, right? Like, you don't want to fuck it up. But anyway, it's money, and I just had to do it, you know. And it's in the bunker and shit, so what the fuck, you know? I'm getting paid to like go to the bunker and like, you know. So I go, and it's cool. There's like a team there that's like, I don't know, I guess probably the John Giorno Foundation is like turning it into like some kind of event space. And so they've got like your typical, it just felt like every other kind of gallery, like it felt like the photo shoots and stuff I used to go on, actually. Like, just like the way that they have people that are sort of like the team leader or the caretakers of the space, or like the project manager or whatever. And then this person does this. And then they've got an intern. And they're just kind of hanging out and like, you know, I don't know. I don't want to be like a judgmental dick or anything. I want to just chill and vibe with everybody. But part of doing this, it was like, it was a little bit of a stinging experience because it was the first time I've done anything in a long time where I felt incompetent. I didn't fuck it up, but like, it didn't go totally perfectly. And I think she knew that, and she was kind of disappointed. Um, but I ran out of weed the day before, so I was like sober. So it wasn't like the most awkward thing. The first thing that happens, this older guy who you can tell is like who's kind of the who runs the place, or who's like the manager or whatever. You know, he shakes my hands, and then he's like, you know, they're talking about the sound or something. They're asking me some question about the sound or this or that, and they're like, "Do you want to come on full time?" The guy got really excited about me. Do you want to come on full time? And I'm thinking, oh, this is perfect. Maybe this is meant for me. Maybe I'm meant to be like full time at the John Giorno Foundation. You know, that would be perfect. But then I'm like, you know, it just became quickly apparent that like I don't know anything about it. I don't know what the fuck. I'm not actually qualified to do anything, actually. You know, I don't really know anything about video technology. I don't know where the industry is at this point. I couldn't even use Premiere. Well, I could, but like, I don't know about microphones, boards. They show me the amp, and it's like from the 70s or something. It's like this unbelievable, like, of course it's what John Giorno has. It's like this fucking power amp from, 1970 fucking 3 or something, 1978. And so, I don't know. I'm just not that good socially. I don't know. I think I just don't really want to actually interact with anybody. So anytime I'm in an interaction, I'm like secretly like sending out this vibe like I'm uncomfortable. I'm not enjoying this. Please stop talking to me. And also, I don't know. I get really judgmental about a lot of shit. There's a lot of anger, I think, that jumps out kind of in certain ways. Um, and so, okay, so this fucking thing, she was super nice and super cool. She actually, like, talked to me and stuff a little bit and, like, got to know me, sort of, like, I was telling her about System Lord and how I broke my glasses, and she's like, oh, so you're a musician, you're a performer, this and that. And she told me I had cool hair. That was the first thing she said. So, I told her I cut it myself, of course. I have to let everybody know that. It feels like warranted to say that. I don't know, when somebody compliments your hair. Well, I cut it myself. All I'm trying to do is inspire them to cut their own hair. Because I think barbers are a conspiracy. I think we can do it ourselves and do it just as well. I can't believe I've been paying people to cut my hair. I should have started cutting my own hair, like, in high school. Like, what a fucking joke. What a racket. So anyway, we talk a little bit. She's nice. At least she's, like, talking to me and shit, which is more than anybody else. But we're going to be working together, right? So I set up this little station with the projector and tape everything down, and she's got slides and YouTube videos. And she's got a script that's printed out with all her poems and pieces on it. And there's like 12 sections. And it's all about COVID. Oh, it was off the fucking chain. To be honest, I just felt very honored and lucky to be doing it. Because it was kind of like the first thing like that. It was sort of a collaboration. I was sort of performing with her in a way. Like, I had to time the slides manually myself. She wanted me to change the slides every 20 seconds. So she had all these slides that were like, she paints over like newspapers or like pages from books, or she'll paint shit. She'll write ink, she writes in like this kind of amazing ink. These like really kind of bullet points. So she's on the John Giorno album with fucking Rollins band and shit. I think she had a band. I don't know that much about her, but apparently she's some kind of like legendary performance artist and like feminist and all this shit. So I probably should know more, but I wasn't that intimidated because I don't know who she is really. But it felt right. It felt like, okay, this makes sense that like this is part of my apprenticeship. It's like doing this. I'm really working one-on-one with her, right? It's the first time I've ever really done that. And so she's telling me, we go through the whole fucking script. It's like a tech rehearsal for fucking play. We're going through all the cues, right? So she's got like 76 slides. She wants me to change every 20 seconds while she reads this piece. And then I go to these YouTube videos. There's one that is... there's one that's animals playing and shit. And then there's one that's... the next one is... Betty Crocker cooking footage, which people had told me different things. When I first opened it, they told me to start it at 4 minutes. Then she told me to play it from the beginning. And then during the performance, I played it from the beginning, and she said, no, 4 minutes, 4 minutes. It's like, fuck. I had it at 4 minutes. She told me to play at the beginning. Before the show, she was like, telling me, and I'm not trying to talk shit or anything. I mean, I had a wonderful experience. I hope she thought I did okay. She seemed like she didn't wasn't thrilled with what I did, but whatever. Just another fucking. I'm incompetent. What can I say? It was like the same shit I do at Columbia. I fucked that up too. Um, I don't actually know anything about this program. It's like a Google Drive and a projector. I don't know anything about it. As far as how it actually works and why it does what it does, it's like I don't have a lot of experience with that. I mean, I have some just from my own shit, but like it's gonna take me a minute to figure anything out, or you might have to tell me. I don't know. Then she has this video of a disco, and then she wants to turn the projector off for a few minutes while she washes her hands. And I've got like these lighting cues. I have to like turn the lights on. So I'm doing a bunch of shit. I'm turning the house lights off. I'm turning the lights up on this. Meanwhile I gotta film. I had to set up the fucking. They had me doing 3 different fucking things. I got to film in the back of the room. I set up a camera and filmed because they wanted that. They just take advantage of me. Turn the lights off, and then I'm running all these slides and shit manually. And then I go back, and then at the very end we go back to this other thing. It's like, so during the performance, everything was going pretty well. The Betty Crocker thing that got fucked up. The food video, I didn't start at 4 minutes in. Like I said, she told me to start from the beginning. So I started from the beginning. Then she's during the performance. But before she's like, it's not Broadway. There's flexibility. It doesn't have to be exact. The cues don't have to be exact. And it was sort of like a run through. It was her first performance since before the pandemic, which, once again, that's how it is for a lot of people. I mean, I've been doing shit since June last year, but for a lot of people, like, they're just now getting out there and, like, performing or going back to events and shit. So, for her, this was her first show, and it was all about COVID, which, to be honest, like, everybody else has kind of moved on. I don't ever hear anybody really read about COVID or even talk about COVID. I think people are just so sick of it. They just don't want to. So it was kind of a surprise that it was all about COVID and washing your hands and shit. I mean, it was great. And it was really special seeing it because I had the script and she was riffing on it. That's what was so inspiring about it. It was like the script was really just like whatever she wanted to do off the script, she just did. And she took it, she embellished on stuff, she used stuff and she built on it, and she kind of would stay on something and repeat it, and it was vocalization. She kind of vocalizes it emotionally and in sort of a character. So just from a learning standpoint, seeing the way that she worked with the script was super important and cool because that gives me a lot of ideas. Like, okay, you don't have to have it all down word for word. You can have it down and then you can just sort of do whatever. Use it to bounce on to whatever you want, And then you go back to the script and da-da-da-da-da, and then and then you add in whatever you want, So that was super cool to see. And just like the ease and the fluidity with which she handled the kind of room. To her, it was not a big deal. It was just like, it was sort of like a rehearsal in a way. She was like, she never read this project out loud, I don't think, she said. So, even that. And I think she wanted visuals, so they brought me in to, like, make it a thing. The instructions were simple. I think it did add a lot. Um, but it was also like taken super seriously, and uh, like she was saying, it's like it's not Broadway. We ran through it once, but it was like it wasn't the most nailed down thing in the world. And so anyway, she reads this piece about the disco, and I think it's about AIDS. And then at the end of that, I'm during the rehearsal, I closed the laptop, and the screen goes blue, and then it turned off, which she liked. And so that's what I thought would happen. And so we do the disco piece after the animals. The animals goes fine. The slides go fine. So we do the disco piece. It goes fine. I pause it. I close it. And the screen doesn't go dark. The disco image is just frozen on the fucking screen in the back of the wall. And so I'm thinking that's not what she wants, but like I don't know how to turn the fucking screen off. And like I'm right next to the goddamn stage, and like I don't want to cause a bunch of attention to myself, or draw a bunch of attention to myself rather. So like I didn't even try to fix it. I just thought I'm just gonna sit here and like it's not my fault. I closed it during rehearsal, it fucking went off. I closed it now, it didn't go off. It's still on. What the fuck's the difference? And so she goes over to wash her hands, and as she's washing her hands, like the fucking there's like a light. It's like a kitchen. It's like a literal kitchen, and there's like a light under the fucking cupboards that's on. It's like kind of disturbing the whole vibe because it's like dark, and there's a projector for everything except like this really bright light in the kitchen area. And it should have been turned off beforehand. But like I don't know this place. I never even fucking been there before, you know. But I'm suddenly like the lighting designer too. I had to set up these fucking lights we have, and like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, really, very much at all. I'm doing the best I can, you know. If they wanted to hire me, I mean that's who Jorno would hire. He'd hire somebody cool that sort of knows what they're doing, and then they'd learn. You know, just because I'm not some expert that knows exactly what they need, it's like I could do the research and buy the shit, you know. If they want to hire me full time, fuck yeah. I guess. I don't want a job, to be honest. Fuck working. Working fucking sucks. It's a waste of time. Work on what you want to work on. Anyway, uh so she turns around and she sees that the fucking disco thing is still on. She's like, I don't want that. Right in the middle of the show. And so I have to like go in and like she says throw up the other slide. So I throw up the other slide, which goes fine. But it's like that's not what she wanted either, you know? So I think that's where I lost her trust. I think she thought this guy keeps fucking my show up. Like first he fucked up the 4 minutes thing, then he fucked up the uh disco thing. So he fucked my show up. So anyway, then at the end, like I'm supposed to throw this slide up, and then like she says something, and then I cue it. And she says another thing, and then I cue it, and that went well. But I don't know. By that point, like I said, I think I had lost her trust, and so I gave her one of my flyers. I made these tiny handouts, you know, for my to hand out at open mics and shit. So I gave Karen Finley one of my flyers. Her artistic style is very similar to mine in certain ways. The black and white and the ink and stuff. And so I just felt like she might dig it, or it just made sense to give it to her, I think. Um, Not that I expect her to give a fuck or come out or anything, but she was asking me about my performance stuff like that. So she was cool in that regard. Most people don't even try to fucking talk to you. So mad respect. I made money, you know. We did it. I didn't necessarily nail it or anything, but like I got paid to fucking work in the bunker. What's cooler than that, you know? So, after that, it was like the fucking KGB open mic Monday, the Hillis show Tuesday, plus hanging up all those flyers in Brooklyn, and then working. I mean, I was at work from 4 till 9, the whole fucking time. Like I was working the whole time, and it took me an hour to walk there. So it's like that was really a whole day of work, like real work. It felt like a job, right? But like I said, afterwards, I felt like I used to feel where I just feel like incompetent. I feel like I'm not actually good at my job, or I don't know. It's not a good feeling, right? Uh, Maybe that's why you become a comedian. Because you fuck up everything else. And then, so, yeah, after that, yesterday, I uploaded a bunch of shit. I met up with my dude in the park. I went to an open mic briefly, but I mostly just chilled after that. And then today, went to the store. I edited that video. Turned out pretty good. Recorded some poetry. Uh, I've been really working hard actually today on video shit. I've been really editing a lot. So much so I kind of got sick of it. Like I probably worked on video shit like hours and hours and hours today. But all the while listening to Eric Bischoff, 83 Weeks podcast, reliving the glory days of the Monday Night Wars with the biggest prick on either side. Bischoff! Flair doesn't like Bischoff. So, Saturday and Sunday it's supposed to rain, but I do want to do a performance before Monday somehow. Monday's the open mic, but other than that, to be honest, I don't have a lot in the books. I've got this thing every Monday, the open mic, and I'm guest hosting an open mic in Queens at the local at some point, but we don't have any wavetable or we don't have any System Lords scheduled. I'd like to get something for Halloween. Uh, and I don't have any other gigs scheduled. So, got to get out there. I mean, I do want to put out some video shit now that the weather's kind of like not gonna be quite as great. It like downshifted hard. It went from being like 80 degrees and in the 80s. I mean, I'm watching this video, I'm wearing a tank top. That wasn't that long ago. It downshifted from being like 80s to like 60 and like below 60. It's like, whoa. Like there was no time really in the 70s very much. Like a week maybe. 2 weeks. If that. And now it's like chilly and fucking. I feel like it doesn't really get this cold till a few weeks later, but okay. So, I don't know. I'm also needing to figure out, whatever the fuck else is going on. I'm hoping to push back this thing so I have a little more time. That way I can focus on the KGB thing and just trying to blow that out every which way I can. Just blow out my live performance. I think that's really what's hitting. And I just need to get out and do as much of that as possible. I think I'm doing exciting stuff with poetry, but it's just the way that I'm connecting with that is through the live performances and these other scenes, like comedians and people I meet at poetry open mics. This whole thing with, I feel like what I've been doing or what I've been trying to do has been a little misguided because, like, ultimately, it's about living with your peer group and with your generation. That's like your friend group for the most part. You can't just like there was an interesting quote in that Alice Notley interview, which was really good and had a lot of things that I think people needed to hear about how Ted Berrigan, he admired the older generation of New York school poets, but he didn't really presume that he could be friends with them. He kind of admired them too much, I would say. He thought it would be like a little weird or something. And I don't know, I feel like I don't know. Maybe that's just an excuse, but like, what do I think is going to happen? These people are going to like, I'm going to become what? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of things to do out there. I feel like I've been kind of limiting my sense of what I want to achieve and how I want to achieve it according to success within this very specific kind of group of people or something, which I think just as a performer, as an artist, there's a lot more things like with the comedy, with System Lord, with meeting all these clowns, with wrestling, even, in that whole world. But also theater, writing plays, directing films, acting, that kind of stuff. There's stuff that can really open up for me. Like I'm feeling like I'm discovering that my power on stage is talking. It's not music. Like, people are telling me, like, comedy's easier than what I'm doing, which I think is actually true. Like, I think I've been fucking myself over by doing music. I never should have done music. The music gets in the way. And it's not, anyway. So I don't know. It's unfortunate that there's like all this blockage and like bitterness or whatever that I have about this situation. But I'm also just like, I don't want to be like a behind the scenes person, you know? I don't even know how the fuck I got involved with this actually in a lot of ways. I mean, like, I like what I do with like video and directing and filming people and shit. I don't have a problem with that, but like the performing is really like my first and foremost thing. And so that's what I want to prioritize. I don't necessarily want anything to get in the way of that. I need to make money, obviously, but poetry, there's such a limited amount of booty to go around. And I mean that like pirates booty. And I don't know. It's just a whole. You have to be an academic. It's that simple. Unless I can make something hit with just my books and the literature I'm creating, which is what I'm trying to do at KGB. What I'm trying to do with all my shit. So, I don't want to limit myself and think I have to only do poetry readings or get certain people to publish me or this or that. It's like, I can go anywhere and do whatever I want, you know? And I don't know. It is that thing like once you fail or whatever, then you're free to just do anything. Because I don't know. I know that I haven't even hardly scratched the surface about what I'm capable of doing on stage. As far as like I get so nervous about it, it's hard for me to put things together in the moment like I can regularly. And so once I get to the point that I'm able to do that, things are really going to take off because I know that I have interesting, skills and shit. So anyway, I'm tired. That's what I'm working on. The struggle. It takes time. So, well, that was one of the points with like Steve Austin, right? Look at his career. He was in WCW. he only became Stone Cold Steve Austin after this whole journey. He was in his 30s. This guy that just won the title, Big E, took him 12 years. He started professional wrestling in 2010. So it takes time. Well, part of what they were saying about the different promotions, right? One aspect of that is like you couldn't necessarily become who you needed to become, say, in like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, right? In WWF, they were Diesel and Razor Ramon. They couldn't really become who they were capable of becoming in WWF. They had to go to WCW. And I was also I read this thing about John Ashbury, or I heard this thing about how Frank O'Hara was the number one guy in New York. So John Ashbury, that was part of the reason why he went to Paris, or it helped him to be in Paris, because in Paris, he wasn't the number two guy behind Frank O'Hara. He kind of had space to just kind of be himself and do whatever he wanted and this and that and develop. I'm starting to think more about that kind of stuff. I don't know, whatever that means. But your development, can happen in a lot of different places. And so why not try to develop, in as many different places as you can, And it's, it's a long and winding road. And it's like, because those guys went to ECW, that's why they made it to WWF, right? Because Steve Austin went to ECW and he could actually kind of start to be himself and use his own ideas and develop a personality in this. But it took time. It took him a few years of performing and doing it professionally before he figured out, okay, the goatee and shave the head and the vest and this and that, the leather. That's kind of, it's for me, it's kind of like that. Now I'm wearing the suit, right? That's a big piece of the puzzle. That's really kind of changed things. The karaoke thing is another piece of the puzzle. The flyers, the chapbooks, these are all different things that have developed. And even with my show, right, doing the poems with it, that's something I could have started doing 2 years ago, but I'm only now starting to go, oh, okay. It just recently clicked. Okay, I don't want to do that for all the episodes. I want to go back and do it for all of them. That's the thing that makes it unique. But it took time and space for that to kind of develop.